We have so much to celebrate this morning. I think it is fair to say that on so many levels, democracy was put to the test and democracy won. There was the unprecedented challenge of how we would vote in a pandemic. There were attempts to stop the vote counts and attempts at voter suppression. And there are surely challenges with the fake allegations of voter fraud ahead. And yet, I think we can say this is what democracy looks like and feel proud. 160 million Americans voted this year, the largest number of people voting in a US presidential election in history. 67% of eligible voters turned out. 100 million people voted early. The turnout was 7% higher than it was in 2016, and actually it hasn't been that high since 1900, when William McKinley was voted president with a historical 74% of the vote, but that didn't include any women or many people of color. This year, almost 3/4 of eligible Virginians voted in this election. So we are celebrating, I'm certainly celebrating, you've noticed the pantsuit and the pearls, right? The election of the first woman vice president and a return of sanity to the presidency. But we're also celebrating a number of extraordinary wins. Time magazine has called 2020 a rainbow election wave. New York is sending 2 openly gay Black men to Congress. They'll be the first gay people of color in the House of Representatives. Trans people were elected to state legislators across the country. Stephanie Byers in Kansas, Sarah McBride in Delaware, and Marie Turner became the first non-binary NB state legislature in US history in Oklahoma. All of the squad were reelected. New Mexico is sending an all women of color delegation to the Congress, a first in our history. Cori Bush, a Black Lives Matter activist from Ferguson, was elected to Congress from Missouri. This election, like the 2018 election, demonstrates that our Congress and our state legislators are becoming more diverse and more reflective of who we are as a people. If we were together in the sanctuary this morning, I think I would have passed a mic around so we could hear from each other. So we did the next best thing. We invited some of our social justice leaders to share their views with you. So we're going to show you a video now. Keep in mind that all of these were filmed on Thursday or Friday before we had the presidential results. So Beth, the video, please.
Hello, my name is Paul Cohen, and I've been a member of UUCR since 1980. This has been the 16th time I've voted in a presidential election. Unfortunately, and only 6 times in the past have I voted for the winning candidate. First time I voted for president was during my last semester in college in November 1960, Nixon versus Kennedy. In 64 through 76, I was in the Navy and so voted in Hawaii, Rhode Island, and twice in California. After counting the number of I voted stickers around my mirror, I've determined that it's more than 23 times that I've voted since moving to Virginia in 1979. So you might say that I consider voting an important part of my responsibilities as a citizen, and why this past 6 months I've been proud to be part of the work UUCR did in the Get Out the Vote campaign. If you think things are contentious in 2020, you might want to consider what happened in 1968. A leading candidate, Robert Kennedy, was murdered, and there were violent riots in the streets of Chicago surrounding the site of the Democratic Convention. If you want to learn more about this, watch the movie The Trial of the Chicago 7. 1972 was not much better. Nixon's re-election committee broke into the Watergate complex to wiretap the Democratic National Committee's headquarters. the Watergate scandal. As I look back, I can't help but think how relatively mild some of this year's protests and marches have been. In more recent times, the Florida vote count, we learned about Chad, hanging Chad, and dimple Chad. And so in many ways, controversies around our elections is not new. And in spite of the turmoil, there have been no coups and the military has stayed out of politics. Over the past 2 days, after listening to Secretaries of State and other senior state election officials describe their procedures for receiving, opening, validating, and counting absentee ballots, I'm convinced that in all the in-play battleground states, all votes will be honestly counted and winners certified in a fair process. More people voted in this election than have ever voted in any previous presidential election. That's a great sign for the future of our democracy. On a beautiful Sunday, let's take the time to reflect on all we have and enjoy the sunshine and wonderful autumn colors. Life moves on, and our country will survive.
Hi, this is Claire Say. I'm with UCR, and I have been asked to share some of my thoughts around the 2020 election. My first thought is, one, I'm glad that I voted early, and two, that so many people, more than ever before, have registered and have voted. Now, my concerns and my thoughts that are not overwhelming, but I do have to think about it, is one, what is going to be the outcome? And whatever the outcome is, I'm going to continue to do the work in diversity, equity, and inclusion and social justice, regardless of who is officially elected. My concern is that we are sharing some of our behaviors with the young folks that are saying, well, if we don't agree, if we are not quote unquote winning, we can question the authorities and we can also question the process and really try to bully people and to stop the process, depending on if we feel like we're winning or losing. And that's, is that the message we really want to share? My hope is that everyone can do some self-care, some self-reflection. Make sure you take care of yourself and your family. Know that this is not going to be the toughest thing that we have gone through, whatever the outcome for the election is. And that we will get through this as we have in the past, because we are resilient, we are strong, we have power in ourselves, and we can share that power with each other. So I wish you well, take care, be safe, be well.
As of 5 p.m. Thursday, the 2020 presidential election hasn't been called. Fox News and the Associated Press are reporting different electoral vote totals than CNN, and my trusted sources are confident we should know the outcome by later this evening, Saturday evening at the latest. I'm a little embarrassed to say that I only squeezed in about 10 minutes of phone banking through UU the Vote. My burning issue this election cycle was much more about democracy itself and doing what I could to upend the effects of gerrymandering right here in our very own Commonwealth. My enthusiasm around this issue was really an outgrowth of my work on racial justice right here at UUCR, and by connecting with and listening to the concerns of people in this community. This work led me to meet an incredibly committed, smart, and fun group of our Commonwealth's most forward-thinking lawmakers and advocates who have shepherded me through this election cycle and given me hope when hope has often been hard to find. In my 10 minutes of calls to registered voters in Texas, one person very politely hung up on me. I got a few voicemails, a few people had moved, but I did have a nice conversation with one person who stuck with me and my script to the end. That experience has me reflecting on one of my biggest election year takeaways. One of the most powerful things anyone can do is to pick up the phone more often, check in with people, build trust, see if there's anything that people need. It shouldn't take a presidential election to reach out across our differences.
Hi, so it's Thursday early evening, 2 days after Election Day, and like many of you, I have mixed feelings. I'm guessing you do too. On the one hand, I'm concerned what we've found about how divided the country is by race, by geography, by education, and most importantly, perhaps by values. I'm really troubled to learn, have reinforced that so many of our fellow citizens have values that are so divergent from mine, or what I think are decent values. Probably should have known, but it's become more clear in recent years. I'm perplexed by what we continue to see about so many people living in two parallel universes where the information they get is so different, which makes it really hard to have a civil and intelligent discussion. And of course, we saw continuing efforts to prevent people from voting, having the right to vote in the first place, and having the vote counted, which continues. And that suggests we need deep reform in those institutions. But with all that, there are some positive things to take out of this that make me feel much better. I'm thrilled by the response of the people in our congregation and other UUs to the UU the Vote effort. You guys' energy and commitment was amazing. And partly due to that, we saw record turnout all over the country, and it's good to see people voting, even if we don't always agree with our fellow citizens' choices. I was relieved that the period before Tuesday and even Tuesday were relatively calm and went pretty smoothly. With all the problems we've had in the past, that was good to see. And so far, we haven't seen much of the violence, and that's good to see as well. And I'm optimistic that if there's going to be a transition, it will be done smoothly despite all the talk from some quarters. So no one knows what the future will bring, but what is clear is that the need for social justice work continues, the fight goes on, and that's always been the case. Thank you all.
Friends, I'm going to talk with you from my heart and the values I hold dear. On Tuesday night, I felt depressed. How could so many people have values so different from mine? On Wednesday night, I felt a little hopeful because it seemed that our election officials were counting every vote. On Thursday night, I felt comforted by the peaceful and joyous count every vote protests. And thankfully, there are lots of votes to count because more people voted in this election than in any before. With our postcards, letters, calls, and text, we told the most marginalized people that their vote is their power, and they rose up and cast their ballots in record numbers. You helped make this so. But democracy is a work in progress, and if we want progress, we have to work. But before starting on more work, I want to reflect. And 3 questions that Rabbi Hillel posed thousands of years ago help me reflect today. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? When I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? To the first question, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? That's easy. I agree. I need to take care of myself, and I do. To the second question, if I'm only for myself, what am I? To that I answer, I plan to do more voting rights work and also racial justice work. The two are intertwined. You cannot separate them. You cannot have one without the other. Third question, if not now, when? To this I answer, I will do more UU the Vote work, but right now, I need a short break. You know, if you're not for yourself, who will be for you?
As the late John Lewis shared, the vote is precious. It is almost sacred. It is the most powerful nonviolent tool we have in democracy. However, I would suggest to you that it is not our only tool. The UUCR, UU the Vote team could not have been able to do or accomplish what we did without the support of our UUCR volunteers, dedication, and commitment of what it was that we were trying to accomplish. Also, we needed the support of the social justice arm of the UUA who provided us guidance and intelligence and a wonderful, wonderful support to do what we needed to do. As UUs, we now have to commit to a more forward looking way to continue our social justice efforts. Voting should not be just about an election. It should provide an opportunity for us to reflect about just what are we voting for. To many, it is about maintaining the status quo. However, I have always believed that voting is about social change. We now know that we will never go back to the normal that we knew before March 13th. And as Unitarian Universalists, I don't know if we should even be yearning to go back to our old normal. We need to be focusing our attention on designing a better normal, not one plagued by toxic and manipulative leadership, white supremacy, poverty, climate injustice, xenophobia, healthcare inequities, and social systems that were never designed to be inclusive. I invite you to think about how we can continue to mobilize our beloved community to not be content with a checklist of well intentioned actions, but, and they make you feel good, but they do not necessarily accomplish sustained change. We are at a critical point, not only in the United States, but I would suggest at UUCR. We need to support the healing that needs to occur here in the United States. But we cannot afford to ignore the change that needs to happen. We have demonstrated that we know how to use our passion to make a difference. Let's not become preoccupied with or wishfully thinking for the good old days, but decide how can we make a new legacy. We need to commit to making good trouble.
Thank you. Thank you to Paul and Claire and Helen and Terry and Lainey and Marcia. And let me again thank Terry, Lainey, and Marcia for co-chairing our amazing UUCR, UU the Vote team, and all of you who participated. As many of your fellow congregants just stated, our work is not over because the presidency of Donald Trump will come to an end. The fact is that this election was incredibly close. I actually believe had it not been for the president's abysmal handling of the pandemic, he might have been reelected. The electoral map of red and blue states obscures the fact that in almost every state, every county, even every neighborhood, we are a divided country. Even here in progressive Reston, more than 40% of the electorate voted for the president. There are people right here in our neighborhoods who look at the world very differently than we do in our clusters. They're in our schools, they're at our gym, they're at your workplace, they're sitting next to you in the outdoor restaurants and in the supermarkets. The number of people I see every day without masks in Reston is a visual reminder that not everyone believes in science here or shares our commitments to protecting our neighbors. I like to think that the people who stole our rainbow flag and the Black Lives Matter banner are aberrant, but maybe they're not. We know that people lied to the pollsters this election cycle again. That's the only way to understand how so many of the pundits got it wrong. On Wednesday morning, I admit I woke up despairing about what the election results said about the American people. I did not want to accept that this was going to be so close. A nail biter, as the New York Times said, not a blue tsunami. There was no massive repudiation of refugee children in cages, children separated from their parents, the denial of science, the bullying, misogyny, the racism, the xenophobia. But yesterday, as the days passed, I realized that the people with the Confederate flags and the people in those cars with the Trump banners trying to run the Biden bus off the road, the Proud Boys, the militia, that's only a very small percentage of Americans. I think the much larger percentage of the voters, the red voters, I think they're afraid that somehow they'll lose. They'll be hurt if the country's systemic racism is upended. They're afraid. They're afraid of what it means to share power with people who are not like them. They are frightened because they have a scarcity mentality that their rights will be diminished if everyone's rights are assured. And they are isolated, as we too are isolated, my friends, in our own social bubbles, in the media that we listen to that is an echo chamber that confirms our own points of view. What I know is that it will be easier for us to build bridges if we can see that the majority of those red voting people are fearful and not hateful. If we can remember our first principle and reach out, get to know them, look for common ground with our fellow Americans. The president-elect has his work unifying the country cut out for him. And we, my friends, as some of you just heard some of our fellow congregants said, we have our work cut out for us. How thrilling to see that the first thing President-elect Biden is going to do is create this Monday a science-driven coronavirus task force. And then on January 21st, we will rejoin the Paris Accords, we will rejoin the WHO, and we will assure the legal status of the Dreamers, all with a stroke of the pen. But we're still a long way from the new Green Deal or Medicare for all, a new immigration program, a national reproductive rights law. We are a long way from being a country that has reckoned with its legacy of white supremacy and racism. We have a newly installed conservative Supreme Court majority that we're going to have to reckon with. We have 2 runoff Senate elections in Georgia in January. And goodness, we have 3 long months before the inauguration with a very angry Donald Trump as our president. So we, my friends, as people of faith and science and reason who stand for the full inclusion and welcome of all people, we need to continue to live our faith aloud, to make, as Marcia just reminded us, good trouble. We're not done. The election does not mean we are finished, but it does mean we can breathe again. It does mean we can hope again. It does mean we can have faith in our government again. I feel proud to be an American today. I bet you do too. So let us celebrate today. And let us remember, as we will sing in a few moments, we who believe in freedom cannot rest. But for today, my friends, let's celebrate. This is what democracy looks like.